isn't just news, by the way. It could be publications, it could be social media. Here's a good example that I like to use. You walk in to a movie theater, all right? How many advertisements do you think you see for Coca-Cola? It's probably more than you think. It's probably maybe 100. As you're walking up there, it's probably outside. It's somewhere like, oh, we serve Coke here. When you walk in, they're probably around the counters or something. They have the ads just on the counter. You see a picture of a bubbly Coke or something. And then when you walk up there, you see on whatever it is they have available, they're like, okay, a Coke is like $9.99 or something here, or some whatever crazy prices they're charging for them. And then not only that, but all the TVs, you know how they turn to commercials, like little ads that are silent, and they show a Coke getting filled up. There's another one. But then you don't think about that, well, when you walk into the movie theater, there's another commercial for, hey, go into the lobby and buy a Coke. Or you see everybody else drinking a Coke. Even the cups that they have, if there is Coca-Cola on the cup, they could be drinking water, but if there's Coca-Cola on the cup, that is an advertisement. How many of those do you see when you walk in there? It could be hundreds by the time you walk in, wait for your movie, watch the movie, and walk out. Alright, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. So today's topic is Homer Simpson's brain, the dilettante mentality, and the media bias. Alright? Why you must guard your brain against things it shouldn't pay attention to. Alright, so let's go ahead and start breaking this down here. What do I mean by this? Well, there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of stimuli on a daily basis that you have the choice of paying attention to or not paying attention to. Now, when they all first enter your awareness, some of them you don't have the choice of paying attention to you, right? Like if I came up to you and took a megaphone and screamed in your ear, you have no choice but to hear that. This is more about things that you have a choice if you're continuing to pay attention to these things or to have them occupy your mind. Let's get started and you'll see what I mean. Let's talk about Homer Simpson's brain for just a second. Okay, so Homer Simpson has a quote that he says something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says something along the lines of, man, every time I learn something new, it pushes something else out of my brain that I used to know. Okay, now, there is a correctness in that sort of thinking, because the way that your brain and your neurons are wired up, if you don't continue to use them, they will prune apart, right? Because they have all the ends that they touch each other, and I think they're called dendrites. It depends on what side they're on or something like that. I'm not a neurobiologist, but you guys probably have seen a neuron. They look kind of they look kind of like this, and they have these little, dendrites all over them, and then they have, this is, I believe, called the axon, and at the end of them they have a little bit more. It's something like that. It's not a perfect example of what a neuron looks like, but you probably know, if you're on something like this, what one works on. And what they do is these little growths here will touch another neuron. Let's say there's another one right here. And they touch those and they'll link up. You see that? And we'll draw that part of it too. And they link up. I think they actually link up this way. So they'll touch each other front to back or something. Anyways, they link up. Let's just say that right here. Now, if you don't use this link in your thinking, what'll happen is they'll prune apart. They'll separate, and they'll start touching other neurons, or sometimes the neurons will just degenerate. Does that make sense? And just like the connections themselves. That's why they say neurons that fire together wire together. If you're having neurons that keep getting activated at the same time during certain situations in your life or certain times of learning, then they'll start wiring together and they'll see each other as this is like a mutual beneficial relationship here. They'll see that and they'll keep together. Now what Homer Simpson is saying is man, every time I learn something, something else gets pushed out. And the reason is your attention is finite. You can only pay attention to so many things a day and be setting up or cultivating these connections, right? Just, there's only so many you can do during the day, and a lot of the times what happens, if you're not guarding against things you shouldn't pay attention to, you'll start these connections about things that you don't care about, and like Homer Simpson says, it'll push other connections out of your brain, basically. You won't remember how to do whatever it is anymore, which might be more beneficial to you. So knowing, for example, about the latest celebrity crushes or scandals and stuff, that has an effect on this system. Remember, you have a lot of these. I forgot what the number is. It's like billions and billions and stuff, and then or whatever, or a lot of the connections is what I'm saying. Like each neuron has like tens of thousands of connections. I forgot what exactly it is, but you probably understand this concept already, that when the neurons, when they start growing kind of together, they fire together, they wire together. If you're doing that and you're thinking about something that doesn't matter, I mean, to some people, I guess if you're a news reporter or something like that, then maybe celebrity scandals do matter for you. If you are not that, though, they probably don't. And if you're spending all of your time not guarding against that stuff that you shouldn't be, paying attention to, then what's going to happen is your neurons are going to grow together so that you understand these celebrity scandals, or who's with who, or who's this, or who's that, or who's doing this, or whatever's going on. And you will lose the ones that help you do things like your job, understand your family, understand the schooling that you were given. You ever notice that when you were in high school or middle school or wherever, that you learned things like I don't know, algebra or geography or geometry or anything. It could be anything. And most of that information you don't have anymore. If you think about it, if somebody asked you, hey, name me this sort of formula and write it out on the board, like name me a formula of how to calculate slope, for example, in algebra, and you're like, dude, I don't remember that. You won't be able to write it. You know why? Because your neurons that set up the connections together that made that important to you have pruned apart. This is why Homer Simpson is saying, man, every time I learn something new, it pushes something else out. That's not 100% true, but there is a correctness in thinking that, because if you're thinking now about a bunch of stuff that has no benefit to your life, it is going to push stuff that does have a benefit out of your life. Now, everybody doesn't need to know how to calculate slope in algebra. Most of us don't remember that, because for most of us that isn't beneficial. But I can tell you what's 100% not beneficial is scrolling through social media, following people who are celebrities, and basically making the shareholders of that social media rich, and they're making those celebrities more popular, and you're taking attention off of yourself. That's probably not something that you want to do, especially if you're watching a channel like this. So this concept right here is talking about that. Let's talk about the dilettante mentality real quick. So a dilettante is defined as, and I'm paraphrasing a little here, is a person who kind of knows enough about a subject to become annoying with it, or to be dangerous with it. For example, do you ever meet a person who they'll find out a little bit about something and then start talking about it and start making decisions with that information like they're an expert? Okay, this isn't the same thing as imposter syndrome, because we all should talk about things a little bit that we're not an expert in. That way we'll grow, and you'll grow these together, and it'll make it easier to understand. But I'm talking about that person who's annoying. They'll say something like, oh, my mommy and daddy said whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and that's what I live by all the time. There's a correctness of living by that in some things. In some things, that's absolutely not true. I guarantee you a heart attack is not going to make you stronger. You might survive it, but what did we just establish? Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger? No, you have a heart attack, you are going to be weaker. So a dilettante would be a person that uses like a phrase like that, or a quote or an adage like that, and they're like, that's what they live everything by. You 100% know the kind of people I'm talking about, who have this mentality of like, oh, I learned a little bit about this. Yeah, now I know that's 100% true. I'm an expert in it. Everybody come talk to me about whatever it is. That's not the same thing as, like I said, imposter syndrome, which I go over in grand depth in one of these things. All right? So a dilettante and a person feeling imposter syndrome probably will never be the same person, because a dilettante has almost the inability to feel that imposter syndrome, or it's much weaker in them. Because imposter syndrome is when you're talking about a situation, or you're talking about a piece of information, or you might be given a talk on it, you might be teaching a classroom, or you might be just sharing what you know, but you're like, I'm not sure if I should even be talking about this, because there's got to be somebody else in the world that's better suited and qualified. Well, of course, there's always somebody better. That doesn't mean you're an imposter. It means you're learning. Dilettante mentality is the opposite of that, and we're going to get into why that is important when we talk about this right here. The media bias. What is the media bias? So, in the ever-increasing list of these cognitive biases that I talk about on here a lot, the media bias is one of the most powerful and prevalent. So basically what it says is, whatever is covered by the media, or whatever it is that you see through the media or experience, you're more likely to give more of your time or your attention, or you're more likely to believe it. For example, if you watch a certain news channel, all right, you're more likely to believe the stories that they give you because you watch that channel and because they're always bringing it up through the media. The media isn't just news, by the way. It could be publications, it could be social media, it could be stuff like, I don't know. Here's a good example that I like to use. You walk in to a movie theater, all right? How many advertisements do you think you see for Coca-Cola? It's probably more than you think. It's probably maybe 100, actually. It might be more than that. And you would think, damn, 100, really? Well, you gotta think about it. As you're walking up there, it's probably outside. It's somewhere like, oh, we serve Coke here. When you walk in, they're probably around the counters or something. They have those, they have the ads just on the counter. You see a picture of a bubbly Coke or something. And then when you walk up there, you see on whatever it is they have available, they're like, okay, a Coke is like $9.99 or something here, or some whatever crazy prices they're charging for them. And then, not only that, but all the TVs, you know how they turn to commercials, like little ads that are silent, and they show a Coke getting filled up. There's another one. But then, you don't think about that, well, when you walk into the movie theater, there's another commercial for, hey, go into the lobby and buy a Coke. Or you see everybody else drinking a Coke. Even the cups that they have, if there is Coca-Cola on the cup, they could be drinking water, but if there's Coca-Cola on the cup, that is an advertisement. How many of those do you see when you walk in there? It could be hundreds by the time you walk in, wait for your movie, watch the movie, and walk out. See what I'm saying? And media bias isn't just about, hey, you're gonna believe this thing, because a lot of people would say, what? That, no, I don't believe everything the media says. That, I think for myself and all that. Okay. And yeah, that is probably true to an extent. The sneaky part about media bias is not only are you more likely to believe whatever they said, but they control the frame of which or by which you see everything through. So even though you might not agree with Coca-Cola, or that you need to drink Coca-Cola or anything, you're still seeing it. They're showing that. They're not showing, like, I don't know, chocolate milk on there. They're not showing Sunny D. They're not showing Pepsi. They're showing Coca-Cola. They're not showing water, for sure. Do you see what I'm saying? So they pay attention, or they craft what it is that you are paying attention to, even if you don't agree with or support it. It doesn't matter. Just the fact that exposure 100 or more times by the time you walk in and out of a movie theater, you've seen that brand like 100 or more times, and that does have a subconscious effect. At the very least, it's gonna be on your mind. You and everybody else out there knows what Coca-Cola is, whether or not they support it, and just the knowing helps that brand like achieve its bottom line, its virality. Do you see what I'm saying? Media bias, there's a lot of different, I'll probably do a video just on that by itself, because there's a lot of different examples about how that works, and a lot of ins and outs. You probably didn't think about the crafting of the frame. You're like, yeah, you know, I don't necessarily believe the news or something. Most people, probably 90% of people would say that. Like, oh, I don't just blindly believe the news or something. But you forget that the news, what it's showing you, they're crafting what it is you're paying attention to. Whether or not you believe it, they're like, okay, now you have seen this. That exposure has an effect on you. And you know what that does? This right here. That does that right there. And that's why I said why you must guard your brain against things it shouldn't pay attention to. Now, that's not saying don't watch the news. For some people, you probably shouldn't. For some people, the news probably will depress you. For most people, it does, because usually they talk about stuff that sucks. Okay? But what this is saying is you guard your brain against things it shouldn't pay attention to, because, as we've already established, just like Homer Simpson's brain, guess what? We all got that one. We all got Homer Simpson's brain. In that it can only pay attention to a certain amount of things at a time. So why are you going to 100 times pay attention to Coca-Cola? Now, it's not saying you can't go in and see movies and stuff, but be aware these things are happening. It's not as simple as being like, okay, you know, I'm gonna be very strong of mental fortitude, and I am not gonna buy Coke no matter what. It's not as simple as that, because even if you don't buy it, the fact that they're making their brand more relevant to more people, there is actually a very powerful use in people disliking a brand, even disliking it and being like, hey, we don't like this, or I'll thumbs down any ad I see for Coke or something, is still engagement. It still helps them a little bit. Do you see what I'm saying? And just knowing about it and keeping the brand on everyone's mind, this is like a campaign, an ad campaign of impressions is what they do. They don't usually say, hey, go out and buy a Coke, or you don't see Coke salesmen really that often, not in the traditional sense. You see what I mean? They're just branding. They just throw a bunch of stuff out there. They, on the cups people are carrying, it says Coca-Cola. In the movies, you see it on their banners, and you see it in ads and stuff like that. You got the polar bears and whatnot. That's all media bias, whether or not you drink it. Now, we have Homer Simpson's brain here, so what does that tell us? That if we're taking time to have the media craft what we're paying attention to, regardless of whether we agree or not, then it's pushing stuff out that we need to give our attention to. You understanding what Coca-Cola is not going to help you in life, unless you're like a shareholder, and many of you probably are, and even if you are, you don't have to understand it to be a shareholder, right? So, this is what I'm saying. It's pushing stuff out that is going to be more important to you. This is also why willpower for a lot of people can, because that's finite too, but can get exhausted so quickly. Because we're out here, we're seeing all of these ads for Coca-Cola, or like, I don't know, like these big box stores, or clothes, or cryptocurrency, or just anything. It doesn't matter what it is. You can even agree with some of these things. But you see it constantly, all the time. You're bombarded by this media. And media bias says, hey man, whatever you kind of pay attention to, that's going to start becoming your life. And it's going to push those other things out. It's going to prune apart these. What it's going to do is it's going to be like this. It's going to erase that. And now, for things that you want those connections for some things. Like you want your neurons to grow together for, I don't know, let's say you are a mathematician. You don't want to forget how to do something like the quadratic formula, because it's pruning apart, because the media is coming in here and talking about Coca-Colas all the time, and you're like, damn, dude, I can't even think. I'm always hearing about this or this or this. It gets much bigger when you talk about things that are much more of a hot button issue. Like, I don't know, some people have an addiction to celebrity controversy. I'm almost certain that that is guaranteed to not help you in life at all. But knowing the quadratic formula might, especially if you're a mathematician or an engineer or anything like that. You use it for whatever it is you're going to. Maybe you don't care about that at all. Maybe you care about planting a really nice garden or something. I don't know. And you need to know about things like perennials and things that need a lot of sun versus some shade. Things that need to be watered more often versus not. Those things are important to your goals and your values and stuff. Ain't nobody thinks that Coca-Cola is important to their goals and values, but that's the thing that's on top of their mind a lot. Now, look in your life, and where can this be applied to what it is you're scrolling through social media? You want to watch people dancing around on TikTok? Is that really going to enrich your life? You know, a couple days later, you won't even remember that, but this will happen. It will prune apart these connections, like Homer Simpson's brain was talking about. It'll prune apart those connections that allow you to remember information that's important. And it'll make it harder for you to learn, too. Because your mind is always on this. It's always on that right there, man. Media. Your mind is always on that. The dilettante mentality, let me tell you real quick how that ties in. Because the media bias, especially when you see articles or you see like features on television, on news or something, or you see people talking about the social media stuff, they often, almost always actually, have that dilettante mentality. A reporter goes in, they learn enough about what's going on to activate the media bias in you, to make a story and make the money that they're supposed to. No offense to reporters, I'm just telling you what happened. This is the same thing for social media influencers and stuff. Now, a lot of these people, some of these people, like social media influencers or whoever, do have specialized knowledge. But if you think about it, a lot of the hot button issues, or if they're following trends and stuff, really they have a dilettante mentality. Because they don't really know that much about it. They'll make an opinion and they'll have these reaction videos. Reaction videos are like 9 times out of 10, that's something that's a dilettante mentality. Not saying you can't have reaction videos, but the person doesn't have specialized knowledge. Now, if you have a social media account dedicated 100% towards astrophysics, and they're like, hey man, there's a news story. They're like, hey man, there's an interesting meteor that's going by, and it's going to cause a meteor shower. And they react to that, they probably don't have a dilettante mentality about it then. Then that's part of like their brand and the things they really pay attention to. But you see people like, I don't know, let's take celebrities for example. No offense towards celebrities, but a celebrity's reaction to a meteor shower. Well, it's really cool. A meteor shower is interesting, it's cool, it's rare, you don't see them often, but are they gonna have as much information about why that is impressive, or why that is a very interesting phenomenon? Are they going to have more than a person who works in that kind of field all the time? No. And then, but it gets worse though. Like I said, when reporters or whatnot cover stories, they do this right here. They find out just enough about it to make the story compelling, to draw you in, to craft what it is you're paying attention to, and then they go off to the next thing. That right there is how those two things, really, right here and right here, become, they feed off of each other. And then it does this, it gives you that. It gives you Homer Simpson's brain, specifically, right? Alright, so, thank you so much for being here. Please do like and subscribe, okay? That really does help me out, do all this stuff for me. And, yeah, so just like I was saying, must be on guard of what your brain, against what your brain shouldn't be paying attention to. Because I guarantee you, there's a lot of it out there that's under your awareness, right? That you don't even know about, that's influencing you, and it's pruning connections apart that you really want to keep. So, anyways, thank y'all so much for being here for this one, and have a beautiful day.